Omar Alfared leaned back, his voice slicing through the air in Arabic. A lowly creature like her dares touch my crystal glass. The insult landed like a blow. Laughter broke out around the table, sharp and cruel, bouncing from one guest to another. They laughed not just at her, but at the thought that someone like her should even stand in their presence. Sarah Collins, 25 years old, bowed her head. Her hand shook as she placed the wine, fingers tightening to stop the tremor. She had endured words before, whispers, mockery, judgment, but here, in this room of power, each laugh felt heavier, meant to crush her. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Silence pulled at her ribs, pressing her into the role they expected her to play. A servant. A nobody. But then, she looked up. Her eyes rose with a calm that startled even herself. And when she spoke, her Arabic carried no hesitation, no weakness, only truth. The crystal glass does not lower the one who holds it. It only reflects the dignity of the one who drinks from it. The words did not echo. They struck. They cut. They silenced. Every chuckle stopped mid-breath. Forks froze in hands. Heads turned, stunned. A table of tycoons and politicians, men who thrived on control, suddenly found themselves disarmed by the voice of a young waitress they believed could not even understand them. Omar's smirk broke first. The certainty in his eyes faltered, the confidence in his jaw slackened. For the first time, he had been answered, not by another rival, not by an equal across the table, but by the very woman he had chosen to humiliate. Sarah did not move. She did not flinch. She stood rooted, her posture quiet, but unyielding. In that pause, she was no longer invisible. She was undeniable. The laughter that once filled the room now lingered as memory only, replaced by a silence so sharp it pressed against every ear. And in that silence, Omar Alfared, billionaire and master of the table, found himself the one exposed. Sarah's silence after those words carried further than any reply she had ever given in her life. Yet even as the hall froze, inside her chest the storm raged. Hours earlier, her phone had buzzed with the message she dreaded. Another denial. Another refusal from the insurance company. Her mother's treatment, once again, dismissed. The words still burned in her mind, "We're out of options." Her fingers had shaken as she read it. She had fought, begged, worked herself to the bone, believing each double shift, each sacrifice, might keep her mother alive a little longer. And now, like a blade across her resolve, came the cruel reminder that money, not love, determined fate. She had folded the phone away, pressed the ache deep, and returned to the dining hall with her face composed. But her hands betrayed her. They trembled, even as she tried to steady them. The guests saw none of that. To them she was only a target. A moving shadow for their amusement. A man in a tailored suit leaned back, eyes glittering with arrogance. His voice carried over the table, "Did she make that apron herself? Looks like it came from a discount bin." Another woman, pearls at her throat and venom in her tone, chimed in, "Maybe she's saving up for something better. Good luck with that on a waitress's pay." Laughter swelled again, ugly, unrelenting. Each word another stone hurled at her dignity. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she did not answer. She moved to the next table, her tray steady, her silence louder than their cruelty. Among the guests, only one pair of eyes wavered. Ayla, Omar's daughter, sat watching, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. Her lips pressed tight, her gaze flickering to Sarah with something almost like shame. But no one else paused. They pressed on, feeding one another's mockery. Every insult sharper than the last. And Sarah, though her body ached, though her heart broke, kept moving. Each step, each measured silence, was her refusal to give them the collapse they craved. They believed she was powerless. But power was gathering in her silence, waiting for the moment to break. Clara, dressed in glamour but armed with cruelty, leaned forward. Her smile was polished, but her words carried venom. Letting someone like her serve us is already a blessing, don't you think? The table erupted, the laughter swelling once more. Glasses clinked, voices rose, the chorus of mockery growing louder. Each cruel word was meant to strip Sarah further, to remind her of the place they had assigned her, the lowest rung beneath their feet. Her hand shook as she poured water, the tremor betraying nerves she fought desperately to hide. The liquid splashed against the rim, and she caught Isla's eyes for just a moment. The young woman wasn't laughing. Her fingers twisted her napkin tighter, her eyes locked on Sarah with a mix of unease and something unspoken, guilt, maybe even recognition. But Omar wasn't done. He leaned back, smirking as if he had won the game already. His voice in Arabic sliced through again, look at her fumbling like she's lost in a street market. No idea where she is. The politician chuckled, loosening his tie. Probably just here for the tips, he added with a sneer. The media mogul joined in, his laugh sharp, his words dripping contempt. Tips in that outfit? She's lucky we let her in the door. The laughter rolled on, each insult piling atop the last. It was no longer a game, it was cruelty in full, their power flexed through ridicule. Sarah's shoulders stiffened. Her lips pressed together in a thin line. And for the first time, she stopped moving. She placed the tray on a side table, her hands steady now, not trembling, not breaking. Then, slowly, she raised her head. Her eyes locked onto Omar's. Calm. Clear. Cutting. And when she spoke, her Arabic rang through the room, every word deliberate, every syllable alive with dignity. The crystal glass does not lower the one who holds it. It only reflects the dignity of the one who drinks from it. This time, her voice did not just echo, it struck like thunder. The laughter died in an instant. The table stilled. The smirk on Omar's face drained into disbelief. The politician coughed, choking on his wine. A diplomat's gasp broke the silence, she understands Arabic. Isla's lips curved into the faintest smile, a spark of pride breaking through the storm on her face. Sarah did not move. She stood rooted, her gaze steady, her posture unflinching. And in that stillness, every mask at the table cracked. The power Omar had wielded with his words moments before now lay shattered before hers. The silence pressed thick after Sarah's words, but it did not last long. Someone at the far end of the table, a woman in gold with a voice sharp enough to cut glass, tapped her fork against her plate. Her smile was cruel as she leaned forward, let's have some fun. Recite something impressive, or are you just a one-trick pony? The table laughed, clapping as if she had just announced a performance. Their eyes turned on Sarah like spectators waiting for her to stumble, eager to watch her fail. Her hand tightened on the glass she carried, her knuckles paling for a fraction of a second. Then, with quiet composure, she set it down. She did not answer their mockery with a smile, nor with defiance. She answered with posture, with the calm weight of someone who would not be shaken. She turned her gaze toward Omar, her eyes sharp, steady, unyielding. And then, without hesitation, her voice rose, measured, resonant, alive with history. She recited Al-Mutanabi. The rhythm of the verses flowed with precision, each syllable carrying centuries of strength. Her Arabic was not just fluent, it was flawless, layered with depth that only true mastery could reach. A scholar seated near the center, his glasses slipping down his nose, nearly dropped his fork. His voice trembled as he whispered, "That is extraordinary, only someone who has lived our language, studied it deeply, could speak like that." The guests turned sharply toward him, their arrogance cracking. Isla leaned forward, her whisper urgent, "Baba, she got every word right." Omar's jaw tightened. His fingers tapped the table in a rhythm too fast, too unsteady, his confidence breaking inch by inch. Around him, whispers rippled, doubt spreading through the room like a current. For every scoff that tried to dismiss her, another pair of eyes betrayed awe. Sarah did not pause. She did not falter. When the final line of the poem left her lips, she lowered her gaze only slightly, as if to remind them that she had not performed for their amusement, she had spoken for herself. And in that moment, it became clear. She was no longer their target. She was their mirror. Every insult they had hurled now reflected back, every laugh now haunted by shame. Sarah remained silent, but her silence was no longer defense, it was dominance. Omar's smirk had vanished entirely. And for the first time, the room's most powerful man had no words to give. The silence after her recitation weighed on everyone at the table. For a moment, no one dared to speak. But Omar was not a man who accepted defeat, not even in silence. He forced out a laugh, sharp and bitter, switching to English as if to pull control back into his grasp. Poetry is easy. Flowery words don't mean you understand anything real. He gestured toward the media mogul, a man always ready to sneer. Ask her something practical, Omar snapped, his voice low but desperate. The mogul grinned, leaning forward with relish. In Arabic, he wove a question meant to ensnare her, dense with jargon, numbers, and the layered politics of trade routes and oil markets. It was not a question for a waitress. It was a trap designed to humiliate, to corner her, to prove she was nothing more than a fraud. The politician chuckled, tipping his half-empty glass. This will trip her up, he muttered. Clara smirked, her pearls trembling against her collarbone. Let's see her fake this one. Eyes turned on Sarah again, eager to watch her fall. But Sarah did not flinch. She tilted her head slightly, listening with sharp focus, each detail sinking into place. And when she answered, her Arabic flowed with precision, measured, confident, unbreakable. She laid out a clear analysis, step by step, explaining trade routes, tariff implications, and the ripple effects of oil market shifts. Her voice carried not just language, but knowledge. She cited numbers, statistics, and outcomes as if she had written the reports herself. The mogul's smirk faltered. The politician's jaw dropped. His mocking chuckle twisted into silence. Slowly, almost unwillingly, his hands began to clap. Once. Then again. And then faster, his voice lifting, that's not just fluency, that's expertise. The shift was immediate. Whispers spread like fire down the table. Awe, disbelief, unease. Eyes darted between Sarah and Omar. The man who moments ago commanded the room now sat stiff, sweat building at his temples. His fingers dug into the tablecloth, his pride slipping away with every word she spoke. Sarah moved smoothly to refill a glass, her composure unbroken, her face unreadable, as if she had not just dismantled the trap set against her. For the first time, the guests did not look at her as a servant. They looked at her as something else, something they could no longer dismiss. And Omar, the man who thrived on control, felt it slipping from his hands. Whispers filled the table, quiet at first, then louder, questions spilling out between the guests. Who is she? One man murmured. How could she know all of that? Another pressed. For every word of praise, a shadow of doubt lingered. Omar's pride flared, desperate to silence the rising awe. His voice cut low and bitter, his words trembling with a fury he tried to disguise, a servant is still a servant. Language doesn't change your place. Clara jumped in, eager to restore her own power through his. She tossed her chin, her voice sharp and cruel, exactly. She's just tonight's entertainment. Let's not get carried away. Several nodded, trying to drag the room back to ridicule. Yet the laughter was thinner now, hollow, forced. Sarah stood steady, her silence unshaken. But in that silence, something shifted. It was not submission anymore, it was defiance in stillness. A refusal to bow. Omar's patience snapped. His voice rose, striking the air like a whip. If you really studied, prove it. Say something worth hearing. The demand cut across the table, his pride clawing for dominance. The guests leaned in, waiting, hungry to see whether she would falter or rise. Sarah did not answer immediately. Instead, she moved with deliberate calm, adjusting a glass, her composure unbroken. Then, her voice lowered, deep, resonant, sharp as a blade. Yes, I was a servant. But I was also the student of Professor Youssef Al-Hassan, language advisor to the government. The room gasped. A name heavy with respect, with authority, with undeniable weight. The politician jolted upright, nearly spilling his wine. His hand trembled as he stammered, I knew the professor, he only took the most brilliant students. Shock rippled down the table. Isla's eyes widened, her hand rising to her mouth as her breath caught. Every insult, every laugh, every attempt to belittle her cracked beneath that truth. Omar sat frozen, his face pale, his grip on the table white-knuckled. His empire of control, built on words, on humiliation, was beginning to fracture. And Sarah, standing in her quiet strength, had become the hammer. The weight of her words hung over the table like a storm cloud. The revelation of her connection to Professor Al-Hassan sent murmurs rippling through every guest, disbelief mixing with awe. But still, some tried to resist the truth pressing against them. A man in a tuxedo cleared his throat, his voice laced with skepticism, even if she studied with him, look at her. She's still here, serving us. Doesn't that say enough? Another guest nodded quickly, clinging to the arrogance that shielded them. Clara sneered, her pearls trembling with the sharp tilt of her head, probably making it all up, trying to save face. Omar seized on their words, his pride bleeding through his fury. His voice rose, brittle and defensive, if she were truly exceptional, she wouldn't be here at all. A real talent wouldn't lower herself to this. All eyes turned back to Sarah, waiting for her to collapse beneath their doubt. For a heartbeat, she simply stood still, her gaze unwavering. Then, with a quiet sigh, as though she had anticipated this very moment, she reached into her apron. Her fingers pulled free an envelope, edges worn from years of keeping, its seal stamped with a royal insignia that gleamed faintly under the light. She unfolded it carefully, every motion deliberate, and when she read aloud, her voice was steady, piercing, undeniable. Full honorary scholarship granted to Sarah Collins, signed by Omar Al-Fared. The words detonated through the hall. Gasps broke from every corner. Guests leaned forward, mouths open, eyes wide. The name, the signature, was his. Omar's face drained of color. His hands trembled against the table, his eyes locked on the letter as though it were a ghost dragging him into the past. Years ago, he had signed her scholarship. One of many. To him it had been nothing. To her, it was everything. And now it had returned, undeniable proof in her hands. Sarah lifted her gaze, fixing him in place with a calm that cut deeper than fury. Her voice carried no malice, only the sharp edge of truth. You forget many, but we never forget you. The hall erupted. Whispers crashed like waves, disbelief, shock, outrage blending into one storm of noise. Guests turned on Omar, their eyes sharp with judgment. The untouchable man now stood exposed by the very woman he had tried to erase. Isla rose suddenly, her chair scraping back. Tears welled in her eyes as she crossed the space between them in a rush. She threw her arms around Sarah, her voice breaking into a whisper only Sarah could hear, I'm so sorry. Sarah held her gently, her presence steady, her face calm. And in that embrace, the room shifted once again, applause beginning in hesitant claps, then swelling into a roar that swept across the hall. Sarah did not smile, did not bow, did not perform for their approval. She stood quietly, unshaken, letting the truth speak for itself. And across the table, Omar sat frozen. His pride shattered, his authority crumbling, his past betrayal now laid bare before all who once worshipped him. The man who had mocked her was left with nothing but silence. The applause spread like wildfire. It began with a few hesitant claps at the back of the hall, then grew louder, stronger, until the entire room erupted. Powerful men and women who had moments ago joined in Omar's laughter were now on their feet, their hands striking together, their eyes fixed on Sarah, not with mockery, but with respect, with awe, with something closer to fear. Omar did not move. He sat stiff in his chair, his fingers clawing at the edge of the table as though it might hold him together. The color had drained from his face. The weight of humiliation pressed against him heavier than any business loss or public scandal. In a single night, before his own daughter, before his peers, his empire of pride cracked open. Clara stared down into her glass, her pearls suddenly choking at her throat. The media mogul shifted uneasily, his smirk erased, his jaw clenched as he avoided every eye around him. The politician shook his head, muttering under his breath, his arrogance stripped bare. Sarah did not acknowledge the applause. She did not bow or revel in their sudden praise. She simply returned to her work, as if nothing had happened. Each movement precise, each gesture calm. Her silence remained her shield and her strength. But silence could not contain what followed. By morning, shaky phone recordings from the gala flooded the internet. The clip of Sarah's reply to Omar spread faster than anyone could control. Millions watched. Comments poured in, raw and relentless. She shut him down with pure class. Who is this woman? Omar got what he deserved. In less than a day, the story went viral. The consequences followed swiftly. Sponsors dropped the media mogul, his name dragged through headlines. Clara's social circle, once loyal, turned against her, invitations vanishing as quickly as her influence. The politician found his mocking face plastered across the internet, his campaign ads pulled, his pride ground into ridicule. And Omar, the man who had ruled every room he entered, fell hardest. His company's board called emergency meetings. Within the week, he was out, his reputation left in ruins, his name now synonymous with disgrace. And through it all, Sarah remained silent. She did not claim credit, did not seek attention. She kept working, her shifts long, her hands steady, her presence unchanged. To the world, she was the woman who had shattered a tyrant with words. To herself, she was simply the daughter still fighting for her mother, still sending home what she earned, still standing where life had placed her. The applause of that night had faded, but its echo followed Omar everywhere. He was no longer feared. He was no longer admired. He was the man who had been undone by the truth he once thought no one beneath him could speak. And the silence that remained was heavier than any words. The noise of the world grew louder around Sarah, but inside her, everything grew quieter. The viral storm raged, yet she carried herself the same, steady, unshaken, as though applause and humiliation meant nothing. One afternoon, a reporter came to the restaurant. Notebook in hand, voice trembling with the urgency of the story everyone wanted to tell. She approached Sarah during a rare break, her words soft but eager. "Miss Collins, your story has inspired so many people. Can you tell us what it felt like to stand up to them?" Sarah listened, folding her apron across her arm, her eyes distant. She let the silence stretch, as though weighing the question carefully. Then she gave only what was true. It felt like telling the truth. No speeches. No performance. Just truth. Then she turned back to her work, leaving the reporter frozen, pen halted mid-sentence, as though she had expected more but received everything instead. Days later, Isla came quietly into the same restaurant. Her eyes were red, not from shame, but from nights of reflection, of reckoning. She carried a small notebook clutched tightly to her chest. She found Sarah, her voice unsteady as she pressed it into her hands. "You changed everything." Sarah opened it briefly. Page after page filled with handwritten apologies, lines shaky but sincere. Isla's heart laid bare in ink. Sarah did not speak. She slipped the notebook into her pocket, her face calm, her eyes soft, carrying the weight of forgiveness without needing to declare it. And as she walked home that night, memories pressed close. She was no longer in Dubai in her mind. She was a girl again, sitting in a cramped Cairo apartment, candlelight flickering as her adoptive father, Professor Al-Hassan, guided her through the rhythms of Arabic. His voice steady, his hand on her shoulder, his lesson etched forever into her: words are power. Use them wisely. That night, his words walked beside her. Her footsteps were steady, her silence heavy, her truth sharper than any weapon Omar had ever wielded. For the first time, she understood, the power she had carried all along was never borrowed, never given. It had always been hers. Life for Sarah did not suddenly transform into a fairy tale. She still worked double shifts. She still sent every spare dollar back home for her mother's treatment. She still carried trays, cleared tables, and lived in the quiet corners where most people never looked. But something had changed. Not in the world she faced, but in the way it now faced her. The eyes that once dismissed her no longer could. The truth had burned too bright, and no one could unsee it. A coworker, worn from his own battles with long nights and low pay, slipped a folded bill into her hand after a shift. His voice was low, rough, but honest. "You're more than this place, Sarah." She tucked the tip into her apron, her face calm, but her eyes carried something unspoken: acknowledgement, gratitude, strength. One evening, as she wiped down a table, a girl no older than 10 approached her timidly, clutching a crumpled drawing. Her small voice trembled but carried, "I saw you on the internet. You're so brave." The paper unfolded in Sarah's hands, revealing a sketch of a woman standing tall, surrounded by falling stars. Her fingers traced the lines, her lips parting softly. She bent down, meeting the girl's eyes, her voice quiet but warm: "Thank you." The girl's mother watched from nearby, tears in her eyes. Sarah folded the drawing carefully, as though it were treasure, and slipped it into her pocket. And still, the ripples spread. A regular customer, an older man with weary eyes, stopped her one night at the counter. His words were few, but heavy: "You made us all think twice, kid." He slid a generous tip across the counter, his gaze steady, then walked away. Sarah stood there, the weight of his words pressing deeper than money ever could. She nodded, tucking the bill away, and returned to her work with the same steady rhythm she always had. But she was not the same. She had faced power with nothing but truth. She had been mocked, stripped, diminished, and she had risen without raising her voice, without breaking her dignity. And though the world would try to forget, it could not erase what had been seen. Sarah's silence had become a force, her stillness a weapon, her words a legacy. She stood wiping a table, her hands steady, her eyes unflinching, her fire alive but unspoken. The world was watching now. And the question lingered: what would she do next? She did not answer. She did not reveal. She simply stood, silent and strong, leaving the world hungry to know where her path would lead. If this story held you, if it struck something deep, stay close, subscribe, and walk with me through stories that remind us who we are. And tell me, have you ever stood in a room where you were underestimated, where every eye doubted you, and still found the strength to stand tall? Share your truth, I'm listening.